So I'm quite happy that I'm invited for that conference, because if in one place I'm meeting people from oil industry as me and people which are connected with military, that sounds quite good, because I used to say that oil is second military power in the world, maybe even first. Thank you for the presentation. That was very impressive, especially for me, because I'm observing the oil industry in Norway, North Sea, same as Arctic, carefully every day. I'm careful reader of a Barents Observer. And in my opinion, the main challenge for the European countries, which are very short of oil resources, is first finding the routes of oil, and then prove secure transportation of oil to local economies. The nearest oil resources which are close to us belong to Norway and UK, in North Sea and Arctic. Until I know, we are cooperating very close with Russia. It's very positive, but we have to keep in mind that stability of Russia is very low, and they can use it also as a power. Until today, we are importing most of oil which we need in Europe. Around 80% is really imported. How important oil is for our societies, we can realize if we say that 78% of crude oil which we import is used as a fuel for cars. But the rest, it might be surprise for most of us, because crude oil is everywhere. We are using that for dresses, for building that. Here is also crude oil. We get it in the lipsticks, in ice creams. We are using that in the food industry. So you'll be really very, very surprised. Crude oil is used for more than 6,000 products of industry. It's really everywhere. Related to production of oil and the transportation of oil. One from the main risk, it's a political risk, which you mentioned in your presentation. Do you have any ideas what will be the future of transportation of crude oil in Baltic Sea, North Sea and Arctic?
Well, that's not really my area about transportation of crude oils. I guess others here will know more about that than me. I focus very much on military stuff, but it's interesting what you commented on, and especially that there is an area where your expertise and my expertise meet in the sense that oil and gas are strategic resources, and they can be used not only as they can be used also for political reasons. When it comes to Russia, I think that, well, we know for sure that Russia is willing to do this. They have tried in many spheres. But it hasn't really paid off that much, I think. And I think the high hopes in Russia for using oil as tool to get what they want in international politics. That hope was very high in the early to mid 2000s. Then it has kind of decreased somewhat after that. But it still is a potential issue, so it should be paid attention to. I'm sorry I can't really talk that much about the transport or the transport to good. I don't know enough about it, sorry.
Organizers let me use Polish, so I use Polish language. Yeah.
Okay. We will translate it to English.
Myślę, że w języku polskim lepiej wyrażę swoje opinie. Odnosząc się do pańskiego wystąpienia,
Regarding to your lecture,
zgadzam się z opinią, że Rosja jest nieprzewidywalna w tej chwili.
it's unpredictable.
Przez wiele lat region Morza Bałtyckiego
The Baltic region
był postrzegany jako region spokojny.
was viewed as a safe region.
Fukuyama powiedział, że ustrój demokratyczny
Fukuyama said that the democratic regime,
jest najlepszym ustrojem.
the best regime,
W zasadzie powiedział o końcu historii.
he said about the end of the history.
W tej chwili przekonujemy się, że jednak nie miał racji.
Now we are seeing that he wasn't so much right.
Do tej pory na Morzu Bałtyckim
Now in the Baltic Sea,
rozpatrywaliśmy zagrożenia związane z czynnikami naturalnymi, technicznymi, społecznymi.
we have problems with like natural issues, technical issues, but not the military issues.
W ostatnim czasie do tej grupy doszły właśnie zagrożenia militarne.
Now we are speaking about military issues.
Z punktu widzenia Polski te zagrożenia są dużo prawdopodobne.
The Polish perspective, the risk is high.
Odnosząc się również do dzisiejszej tematyki bezpieczeństwa energetycznego.
Also with the energy security issues.
Zagrożenia militarne postrzegamy bardzo poważnie.
The military issues are viewed from the Polish side very seriously.
Szczególnie w odniesieniu do elementów infrastruktury krytycznej.
Especially with regards to critical infrastructure.
Do pańskiego wystąpienia dodałbym jeszcze bardzo ważną jedną datę.
For your presentation, I would add one more date.
W tym, co zrobiła Rosja w ostatnim czasie.
What Russia did.
Rok 2012 uruchomienie programów związanych z cyberprzestrzenią.
2012 and starting the program of cyberspace
Wówczas przeznaczyli około 70 milionów dolarów.
They started program with $70 million
na uruchomienie programów związanych z oddziaływaniem w cyberprzestrzeni.
for using cyberspace to interfere in other regions.
Dzisiaj to oddziaływanie jest bardzo mocno odczuwalne.
Now we see this, the outcome of this program.
Szczególnie w odniesieniu do minionych wyborów w Stanach Zjednoczonych.
Regarding to the US elections, maybe.
Niemcy również przygotowują się do odpierania ataków podczas swoich wyborów.
Now the Germans are preparing for the counter operatives to those issues.
W Polsce również traktujemy to zagrożenie bardzo poważnie.
In Poland we are seeing this seriously also.
Chciałbym w związku z tym zapytać, czy Norwegia rozpatruje to zagrożenie.
So I would like to ask you, is Norway viewing this cyberspace security issues high and how it's from a Norwegian perspective do you see it?
Thank you. I fully agree with you that, and I am actually probably I should include that in my list of major data as the fifth one. That's a good idea. I have to admit that I think we are taking it serious now, but we delayed it too much. We didn't take it serious when the program started in 2012 to the same extent we have, but it is really increasing focus on it now. Both on how you can, on what the nature of the threat is, and also how you can counter that threat. I have this, again, it's the technical side of this is not my expertise, but I have to some extent the impression that the means to create problems develop faster than the means to defend yourself against those problems. But it is indeed a very big thing. We have, to some extent, reorganized the services that deal with this issue, and there is not much more focus on it. At the same time, this is a threat that is more difficult to deal with than the previous threats because it's so ambiguous. It's when there is an attack at the server from somewhere in Russia, is that the Russian government? Is that some group in society? Is there a link between those? Who is the perpetrator of crime in this situation? That's more difficult to know than with the regular military threats, when you actually can see. I think this is something we need to broaden the perspective, to keep in mind not only the cyber threat, that is difficult to know whether it is an attack or not. You have the same if Russia starts to use more private military companies, for instance. Is that the Russian government or is it something else? We have a lot of situations where something, or we potentially will have a lot of situations where something bad or negative is happening to us, and it's unclear who has done it, or is it the state, or is it someone else? And this is very important for how to react, because we don't want to react if it's done by some group within Russia. We don't want to blame and go out of the Russian state for that. At the same time, it just makes it more complicated for us.
Yes, please.
So I will ask you about risk. If we cannot talk about transportation, maybe a common area will be a risk. I noticed yesterday evening that you've been working with political risk or risk, something like that, on LinkedIn. So, yeah. so I will ask you if you have an idea, opinion, what will be the high risk for Baltic countries to import oil and gas from Arctic, which is very close to Russia and under Russian pressure, or from very remote places like Northwest Africa, Middle East, which are also under political risk, threat, cyber attack, pirates attack, and military conflicts. What's your opinion? What shall we do in near future?
Well, I'm a little bit out on the limb here, but I would say, well, when you present it like that, I still would think that the Arctic would be the safer choice. Now, this might sound like I'm selling Russian Norwegian oil to you, which is not really the case, but but I think, well, actually, my impression with Russia at the moment in the Arctic is that they are relatively happy with the situation as it is. They don't want to rock the boat. They are rocking the boat in the Baltic Sea. They are rocking the boat in the Black Sea. They are creating problems with these dangerous flights and all that. At the moment, they seem to, okay, they're building up their military infrastructure, but they would, at the moment, I think, prefer to keep things relatively calm as they are. Also because they are in need of selling oil themselves. So at the moment, at that level, I think there's some kind of joint interest between Norway and between Russia, and therefore oil bought from the Arctic would probably be the safer choice. At least the Arctic is much more, even with all the potential threats for the future, the Arctic is still much more stable at the moment than the Middle East and the pirates and all that, I think.
Yes, I agree with you that Arctic probably get a lower risk level, but we have to be careful about the situation with Russia, because, for example, one from Scandinavian oil companies, it's not Norwegian but Swedish, I believe, Lundin Petroleum, just got new funds a week or 2 weeks ago, huge funds of gas and oil. But if you read it carefully, you know that DEA partly own Lundin Petroleum, and DEA is owned in 30% by Russian multimillionaire Mikhail Friedman. So there's connections and Russian influence on the oil industry, transportation, and country's security, it's huge. So we have to observe it very carefully. That might be also a field for cooperation between people which are working with a risk, representatives of military, analysts, and oilmen as main.
Bardzo interesująca była przedstawiona przez Pana koncepcja.
It's very interesting conception.
Tak jakby nawiązywania kontaktów z Rosją.
For making contacts with Russia, relations.
W tej chwili z punktu widzenia prowadzenia negocjacji bardzo trudno jest ufać Rosji.
But now from the negotiation business, it's really hard to negotiate with Russia from the situation of what we have.
W Pańskim wystąpieniu zauważyłem bardzo dużą dozę optymizmu.
In your presentation there was a big optimism.
Czy być może przewidujecie, macie takie prognozy?
Do you see, do you have this prognosis in the future?
Od którego momentu będzie można bardziej ufać Rosji?
From which point we should start trust Russia more than we trust now? Or Norway is trusting Russia.
Thank you. No, I'm not an optimist. Well, actually, by nature, by personality, I am an optimist. But in this area, when it comes to Russia, I'm not an optimist. I understand that how you could get that from my presentation, but well, I'm optimist in the sense that, and this goes back to Fukuyama, who you mentioned Fukuyama. I don't believe in the end of history, but I do believe that the democratic system is the best. And I actually, and this is my optimism, that I think also Russia, in the far ahead in the future, could become a democratic country. I don't think any country is doomed to being autocratic for eternity. But that's about as far as my optimism goes. I don't think that we will have any easy relations with Russia for the next 10, 20 years. I don't think we can trust them even, as you say. When I'm talking about dialogue, about finding areas of common interest with Russia, this is not because I think we already can trust them, but I do sincerely fear that if things go the way they have done for the last 2 years, there is a real danger of a big war. This is catastrophe number one. So I think even though Russia is guilty, we need to keep the dialogue with them and even to find areas of common interest in order to avoid that this develops into the total war. But we should not give in to their demands, we should not give them Ukraine or anything. We need to keep the principles steady, but at the same time. So I'm not talking about the world looking better than it is, I'm just talking about avoiding the catastrophe.
So that means also that we, according to what you said before a moment, we shouldn't make Russia strong. For example, by paying for the oil. Is it true? I understand that well.
I'm actually glad you brought up that issue, because this is something we talk about a lot at home as well. Is a strong or a weak Russia the best for us? I actually think that a strong Russia in terms of economy would have been better. I think if Russia had been successful economically today, they would have been more relaxed. Maybe they would have even had stronger military forces, but they would have been more relaxed and less angry. I think that the most dangerous thing is what we have now, which is the Russia which is failing economically and which has a need to put the blame for their economic failure on everybody else. I think that makes them much more unpredictable and also much more aggressive than they otherwise would have been. So if we could make Russia, but we can't make Russia strong. Only Russia can make Russia strong. We can buy the oil, but that's about it. Yeah.
So we have to increase the oil price. I'm quite afraid that that oil price will get much higher in a few years. My opinion is, the longer that stays on a very low level, the faster it will rise. Just in a few years. Looking for Norway, last 2 or 3 years, Norway decreased investment in the oil business, and for the next year, from 2017, you are planning to decrease your investment another 50%. So that means that that old fields will be empty, and you will not find new. So we'll get higher oil price immediately. I'm observing your North Sea fields, Flotta, Witch Farm, which I remember some 15 or 20 years ago that we got oil from them in color of tea with lemon and consistence of milk. Right now it's rather dairy with a brown-black color. So the quality of that oil is much worse. If you don't find more oil, you will not invest money in oil industry. All of us will get higher price. You will get richer. Say Russia.
Yeah, well, you're probably right in what you're saying. The thing is, of course, as I think you know, that in Norway this is also a matter of the climate and the future and what kind of energies we're going to use, and there is a high pressure. Actually, the current government almost collapsed last week because of this issue. Now they saved their position in the final moment, but to get away from the dependence on oil and gas is very important, and this is behind that too.
There's no way.
I don't know, maybe you know better than me.
Jeszcze chciałbym tutaj dodać, bo mówimy tutaj o tej zależności od surowców energetycznych.
We are speaking about dependence with the resources, natural resources.
No, Rosja wykorzystuje ten czynnik w wojnie hybrydowej, która również nas dotyka.
Hybrid warfare is natural resources.
Oprócz tego czynnika energetycznego mamy do czynienia również z czynnikiem informacyjnym.
We have this natural resources factor, but we also have information factor with this the hybrid warfare.
Myślę, że dążenie do mocarstwowości przez Rosję
I think that gaining power from Russia
może doprowadzić do prowadzenia lokalnych konfliktów.
may lead to local conflicts.
Jeśli chodzi o wybuch takiej wojny o wymiarze większym,
I think we are speaking about the huge war on the bigger scale, not the original.
wydaje się takie wydarzenie bardzo mało prawdopodobne.
It's quite unlikely that it should go out.
W tej chwili widzimy, że bardziej efektywne są takie punktowe konflikty zapalne.
I think now we see that it's most used to what we see as regional point conflicts.
I tutaj zgadzam się z Panem, że
I agree
obszar biegu północnego
that the North Pole
może być takim obszarem, w którym do takich konfliktów może dojść.
can be the region that those conflicts can go.
Czy widzicie pewne symptomy w tamtym regionie
Do you see any symptoms in this region?
oddziaływania Rosjan i dążenia do tego typu konfliktów?
See influencing of Russia to raise these conflicts.
W zeszłym roku mieliśmy
Last year we had
takie zdarzenie, w którym wojska rosyjskie wylądowały przypadkowo na wybrzeżu litewskim.
last year we had happening that Russia forces landed on the Lithuanian soil.
Czy tego typu zdarzenia miały miejsce w odniesieniu do Norwegii?
Do you have in this kind of situations that Russia, because of mistake, landed or crossed the border lines in the north?
Well, we do actually. You may know the archipelago of Spitsbergen, which is under special international treaty, but is still Norwegian territory. And I can't remember if it was 2 years ago. I think Dmitry Rogozin, who is the head of the military industrial complex in Russia, and he's a vice prime minister, and he's under the EU sanctions, suddenly decided to take a trip to Spitsbergen. He is banned from, because Spitsbergen is under Schengen area, so he was not supposed to be there. He was not allowed to go there. He went there and then had a photograph of himself on Twitter, everything. It looks very much like this. It's a test. Yeah, just to show, okay, you say I can't go there, but I will show you I go there. Then this year there was an episode again on Spitsbergen where some special forces from Chechnya actually landed on Spitsbergen without asking permission, as they should do before. And I don't know the details of this, but again, it's an episode of something that should not happen. It didn't happen, like they didn't do this before. They do it a little bit now. Whether that is just to test us or just to show that they can do it, whether it's the same thing that is behind the dangerous episodes in the Baltic Sea where they fly near the ships, I don't know, but I do think that we should be prepared for more that kind of provocative behavior, and not only in the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea, but also in High North. Yes, and we kind of hope this wouldn't come to our areas, and it hasn't come on a large scale, but these 2 episodes show that it has started a little bit.
Thank you, gentlemen. So, are there any questions from the audience?
Can you tell a few words about refugees in Norway?
But refugees in Norway? No, now we
bicycles, on bikes.
Oh, of course, with the bikes.
From
yeah.
Russia. Yes.
Well, yes, that's a good question. You brought that up. I don't know if the audience knows this. I'll just talk about what happened. Last year we had a huge influx of mostly Syrian refugees across the Russian-Norwegian border in the High North. And the thing with the bicycles is that it's written in the treaties that you can't come to the border point and ask for asylum by foot. So there was a small business in Nigel that rented them bicycles so that they could come by bicycle as well. But the big question, the political question here was this done on purpose by Russia to make problems for us or not? Was this, even there was somebody in Norway talking about this being some kind of hybrid warfare. I have seen the answer on this because there were changes made to the regulations of how Russia conducted its border control, which made it easier for the refugees to get to the border. But notice of this has been given to Norway in advance, which we didn't pick up, I think. So there may have been some blame on our side. My gut feeling is that there was, I think rumors spread very fast among refugees when there is an opening for getting into Western countries. So I think basically suddenly quite a lot of people in Syria understood that quite cheaply they could take the plane from Syria to Moscow, change at Sheremetyevo, take another plane to Murmansk, and this was actually cheaper and faster than paying smugglers to go on these very dangerous boats in the Mediterranean. And they did this for a while, but then the rumor got spread again that the Norwegians stopped them on the border because we put in very harsh measures to stop them, and now the problem is gone. So statements by Trump that he doesn't take Article 5 of NATO so serious. I mean, our people have been there now every day for a long time to find out whether there's anything in it or not, and the impression we get is that he said this basically more or less out of hand, and there are people around him at least telling our people, don't worry, Article 5 is still there. So let's hope for that. But I'm more worried about the unpredictability of this person also. He may not have meant everything he said in his campaign, but he seems somebody who may easily shift position, and that makes the whole picture more unpredictable. In terms of policy on Russia, we shouldn't only look at the American elections. I think probably the elections in France this year or next year, maybe even more important. For example, I know from a Ukrainian context that the Ukrainians at the moment seem to worry more about France than they do about Trump. They may be wrong, they may have underestimated the danger of Trump, but they are really worried about the French elections because two of the the front runners in those elections have close relations to Putin. There's also a question of the German elections, though that's less worrisome, I guess. But at least I know our government, and as I said in the presentation also, almost the entire political landscape in Norway is not for easing sanctions, not for going away from sanctions. What has happened in Ukraine has shocked our political leadership. And this is probably different from, I mean, in Poland you always kind of had an eye on Ukraine, but I work as a Ukrainian expert in Norway, and nobody paid attention to my knowledge for 20 years, because who cares about Ukraine? But after Crimea and after Donbass, this has really come up on the agenda. So I don't, at least our country is not going to back down and kind of sell Ukraine to the Russians. But this is a long answer to your question, but on the main point, is the Trump election a danger or not? It may be, but we don't know yet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that riveting discussion. And now we would like to invite you all for a break, a cup of tea or coffee, and we will resume our conference in